So today we're going to talk about the hexagram. It's kind of a good lead on from discussing the pentagram previously. By the way, I realise that there's a bit of a noise in the background there, which is actually my fan heater. Yeah, it's a bit cold here in Johannesburg at the moment. We had a cold front come up from Cape Town. So, I mean, the temperature's still in the 20s, but Celsius, but we've got a bit of a icy breeze going on, so it's a bit chilly. And I've got my coffee, so we're all good. All right. So the hexagram. A lot of people know it as the Star of David. I'm going to put the hexagram here so you know what I'm actually talking about. Not the pentagram, it's the six-pointed star, the two triangles. Okay. So also known as the Star of David. Now, one understanding of why it's called the Star of David. This is what I came to believe, what I learned and understood. The name David is made up of three Hebrew letters. There's Dalet, Vav, and Dalet. So if you take the two main letters, obviously Dalet and Dalet, you've got two triangles. Now the reason is, in Hebrew, the letter Dalet doesn't really look like a triangle. It's kind of like a tabletop with a line coming down. But if you go a bit further back into Phoenician, it's a triangle. And also in Greek, the letter delta is also a triangle. So this is, as I say, this is what I believe is the reason why it's called or referred to as the Star of David, rather than using the hexagram or what we use today, in modern English. Now, if you look at the hexagram, it's two triangles that are overlapping, and this creates a mystery, whereby the masculine and the feminine actually come together. It's actually the union of opposites. So it's not just the masculine and feminine, it's man and God, or man and the divine. If you go into yoga, and the Hindus, they call it the Sitkona Yantra. And it represents the union of Shakti and Shiva. On an elemental level, it's representation of water and fire. And these elements are actually opposites, because water extinguishes fire, whereas fire consumes water. And air bridges the two. So if you actually go back further into the series, you'll get to the what I call the active meditation, and in there is the mother breath, and the mother breath is using those three elements. It's the three elements that you find in Hebrew magic or Kabbalistic magic, is air, water, and fire. So you use air, you breathe in air, aleph. You then breathe out mem and shin, which is water and fire, but air bridges between the two, so it keeps them sort of separate, and stops them from killing each other and destroying each other. But with the hexagram, you're actually bringing them together, combining them, bringing them into unity. So it's a sort of representation of the union of opposites. Now, in his book, Dr. John Mumford, in his book Ecstasy Through Tantra, he actually wrote about the hexagram in relation to tantric practices and the representation of the masculine and feminine. And I'll put a little or diagram up here of what the actual tantric hexagram. But what he wrote in his book was the English sexennial, the Latin sexennium, a period of 6 years, is an equivalent or cognate of the Greek prefix hex, meaning 6. Esoterically, the hexagram is a geometrical diagram of intercourse depicting the union of the male triangle, mind of Adam, with the female triangle, body of Eve. In Tantra, the 6 points of the star are the major genital erogenic zones of male and female. The hexagram, if we may be permitted a neologism, is really a sexagram. Now this theory of union can be taken a bit further, and we can actually look into traditional craft or witchcraft. And with this, in traditional witchcraft, the god is often thought to as being the fire bringer, the god or the one that brought fire to man. So he then represents the element of fire. And if we go back to the Hindu Sitkona yantra, then this would make the goddess the watery element. The common elements would then be air and earth. If we go back into the tantric representation, then this would make the lingam, the masculine aspect, the fiery aspect, and the yoni, the feminine aspect, would be the watery aspect. And the overlap of the two triangles, or the deltas, would create a harmonious bond between man and God, or man and the divine. And in Hindu, this is referred to as the Narayana. Now, if we take the hexagram and place it on the Kabbalistic tree of life, the Hexagram, and I'll put that down here. I'll just move over this side so it can actually fill the rest of the screen. If we place it on the tree of life, then we find it placed within Tiferet, and Tiferet is the sephira, or the place of the holy guardian angel. If we refer this back to traditional witchcraft, and even the Nordic traditions, the Celtic traditions, Anglo-Saxon, etc., then we would be equating this with the fetch. And the fetch has a few different definitions, a few different ways of looking at it, but it's basically the other half of the soul, if I can put it that way. So if we look at the HGA in the same terms, because through the process of actually gaining knowledge and conversation with the HGA, one of the things that is referred to is that a marriage takes place. And the same thing happens with the fetch. We refer to the union once again as being a marriage between yourself and your other half, or your fetch, or your holy guardian angel. So the hexagram being on Tiferet in the tree of life is quite significant, because you have that union of halves, a union of opposites. In this case, possibly not opposites, because the holy guardian angel and the fetch are not opposite to us, but they are, we could say, the other half of our soul, and therefore we're bringing them into union, bringing them into a marriage. Also, with it being in Tiferet and the holy guardian angel and the reference to the fetch, it's the Tiferet's basically the heart of the tree of life, and if we bring that into relationship with the body, then the heart chakra is where the fetch beast, the fetch beast, the fetch mate. That's where if we go back a bit, the fetch beast. I'm going to refer to the fetch beast here. That's where the fetch beast resides, and it's where the holy guardian angel is said to reside. So we then again have that overlap between two different traditions, the Kabbalistic and the traditional craft, where the union of the two is becoming aligned within the heart of the body, whether it's your body, the microcosm, or the body of the tree of life, which is the macrocosm. And it's bringing the macrocosm and the microcosm together also. So just referring back to the fetch, as I mentioned, you have the fetch beast. The fetch beast resides in the heart, and the fetch beast is the guide or the guardian that actually many people refer to it as riding the fetch beast into the underworld, where you then meet a fetch mate, which is usually a fairy companion. and you then, once you meet your fetch mate, your fetch mate is the opposite of your soul, the opposite half of your soul, and you come into union and you come into marriage. So there's all this representation and symbolism between all different traditions as well. This is why I like looking at different traditions. We might call things different, might refer to things differently, but there's definitely overlaps between all of them, and very interesting overlaps, I must say. Okay, now placing the hexagram on the middle of the tree in the heart in Tiferet. This also means that we've still got a way to go. We're only halfway there. So if we move the hexagram up a position so that in the middle of the hexagram is Da'at, then we start to represent what Crowley called the great work. So here we find the progression, the movement upwards. And if we actually place the pentagram below the hexagram, so it forms the lower half of the tree and the hexagram forms the upper half of the tree, then we actually see, have a look at the image, we actually see that the two actually meet in Tiferet. So this quite often represents the progression from physical to planetary, so elemental to planetary, because the pentagram represents the elemental aspect, and the hexagram represents the planetary aspects. And then obviously Da'at is the invisible Sephirah, it's the bridge. So this allows us to move upwards, to progress, to ascend to the final destination of Keter. Now, if we go into ceremonial magic, we have the rituals of the hexagram. Hexagram in Golden Dawn. Now, in Thelemic version, this is called the Star Ruby, and what we find is that the hexagram has been assigned the name of Ararita, and Ararita contains 7 letters, and there are actually 7 points in the hexagram. Now, we always talk about 6 points because we look at the outside, but if you consider the diagrams I just showed you, where you have the hexagram positioned on the tree, in the center is always a Sephirah, and that's your 7th point. This acts very much like the seed within the womb, and in this reference we also find that there are 7 planets. This is why the hexagram becomes the planetary aspect. So the Golden Dawn placed 7 planets on the hexagram, so the 6 points and then the center. And just to show these 7 points, it's a lot easier to see if you use the unicursal hexagram that Crowley created, which is there. Now, in this representation of the unicursal hexagram that Crowley did, you can also see in the center he put the rose, and the rose has the 5 petals, which then represents the pentagram and the 5 elements. So it's quite nice because you've got the representation of the physical and the planetary, or the elemental and the planetary again. So you've not only got the hexagram with the union of man, if we consider man physical and divine being planetary, but also the overlap of the pentagram and the hexagram, so the elemental and the planetary. What's also interesting is the relationship to, or the association with the numbers here. So now with the unicursal hexagram we have 7 and 11. You've got 7, which are the 7 points, or the 6 points of the hexagram and the center, and then you also have the rose in the middle, which is the pentagram, the 5 points. So you've got the 6 points of the hexagram and then the 5 points in the middle of the pentagram, which makes 11. And 7 obviously represents the 7 planets, the 7 celestial bodies that was used in occultism, whereas 11 is actually considered to be the number of divine union and magic and new beginnings. But we find that divine, the number of divine union here as well, which also then comes back to the hexagram itself, which is the union of man and the divine. And also 11 is the sum of 10 plus 1. So if you refer back to the Tree of Life, you have 10 Sephira, and then we have Keta, which is 1. Well, Keta is the first Sephira, and if you combine that, then you get the number 11. There's a lot of mystery and teachings behind this, and well, that's it for the hexagram, really. So thanks for joining me again for another video. If you haven't watched any, if this is the first one you're watching, and you've gotten this far, please have a look at the other videos in the series. This is a whole magical foundation series that I've decided to do, because what I was talking about on my channel was very much related to actually knowing some kind of magic, like sigil work and candle magic and things like that. But it's good to have a solid foundation before you actually start those practices. So that's what this whole magical foundation series was about. Anyway, thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.